stand in silence. Just hear the creation cry out their praises to God. As we sang about this, it's not just a poetic song, but it's a biblical song where God says, if you don't praise me, I'll have my entire creation praise me. Let's join this choir of praise to the Lord, not just with our voices, with our hearts. Let's recognize His greatness. Let's recognize that He rules over the world, that He is our God, He is our Father, that He deserves our utmost worship and attention. So let's do that for a minute. God, even in this short moment, I realize I become so restless. I want to just move on to the next thing. I think that reflects all of our lives. We're just so busy running around, trying to figure out things in our lives, trying to fulfill our dreams and our vision, trying to take care of our family, their needs, trying to work hard. But what for, God? What for? If we truly believe that we're created to worship You, why can't we take moments like this just to worship You, to think of You, and just be in awe of You, God? So I pray today that You'll remind us to slow down and truly be in Your presence and recognize the beauty of Your presence. And we can't do that by just getting a glimpse of You. God, we want to sit at Your feet, hear Your voice, and lock our eyes on You, so we can fully embrace Your beauty, Your majesty. God, You're so amazing. We worship You today, God. Receive our hearts as a pleasing sacrifice unto Your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you everyone for being here with us. My name is Brian. If you don't know me, I have the honor and privilege of serving our congregation as the lead pastor. So today, before I begin my message, I'm actually going to invite our Elder Alex to come and share a little bit of our missions ministry of what we do and give you some important updates. And it's so timely because, as you heard earlier, or if you maybe you didn't hear because announcement happens way in the beginning, so if you came a little bit late, you missed it. But this weekend we actually celebrated 1 year anniversary or memorial of Pastor Neil, and what we're about to share is actually a very timely update for the whole church. So with that, I'm going to invite Elder Alex to come and share a brief update on these topics.
Good morning, everyone. So, my name is Alex, one of the elders for English congregation. This morning, I wanted to show you a couple of slides, and there's a bunch of numbers on it. But what I really want to share with you is not the numbers But behind every number, there's a face, there's a name, there's many stories that God is still being written on each one of their lives. And more importantly, it tells a story of our English congregation. It's not about recognition, it's not about a process, but is truly out of a genuine love for the people and for God. And what you see here is only part of the picture because EC is not only just love our neighbors, we love all the people God has sent to us. So we send people to the nations. We have missionary families that we pray for, we give to, and we send behind in countries all across the world, in Thailand, in the Philippines, and in Central Asia. We send short-term mission teams to these locations to help support them as well. So we equip, we go. And so let me just briefly walk through some of these slides, these stories with you. So the first one is on Christmas banquet. I know it's kind of early for Christmas, but who says we can't talk about Christmas in May, right? So every Christmas time in December, we open our doors to our neighborhood families. And we've been doing this for 2 years. It may seem short, but these 2 years was actually a natural expansion of the ESL Christmas banquet and dinner that we've been serving since 2016. So in 2024, we decided to expand it wider so that a greater community, a broader community, could actually join into to this banquet. Now, these banquets are not a charity event. We don't serve them from a distance. Matter of fact, we have servant leaders not only serve, but also sit in chair tables with these neighborhood families. And what our goal is not to recruit them, not to have any ulterior or specific agenda, but really truly want them to feel welcome and feel loved, that we are part of the community and we are here for them and with them. As you can see, over the last 2 years, we have over 230 families, 230 individuals had joined the Christmas banquet, and last year we have over 120. And out of that, every year it's been about 25 to 30 servant leaders who both serve the food, get the decorations done, as well as sitting among these neighborhood families. So the ratio is 1 to 10. So that is challenging. So if you have not participated in serving in Christmas banquet, I would ask you to consider being a part of the servant leaders, to help, to serve, and to just sit by them and be able to just talk with them and build a relationship with them. And this is who EC is. And the next, I want to talk about food distribution. So since the pandemic, fall 2020, we have a team of servant leaders. It's even a much smaller team. And now it's being supported by community volunteers. And I want to stress there's a difference between servant leaders and volunteers. Volunteers will serve at their own pace, at their own wishes. But servant leaders, what God called us to do, what God called us to be, we serve because we're called to serve. And that's what God called us to do. And so over the last 6 years, we have estimated approximately 15,000 to 20,000 family units have received food distributions. And that equates to, the number is actually correct, 75 to 100 tons of food. And when you convert that into meals on table, I would say that if it's not hundreds of thousands of meals, that's thousands of meals on people's table. And again, we don't do this from a distance. We don't do this as just a charity event. We hand over these boxes, we learn their names, we ask about the families, and we pray with them, and whoever needs prayers. See, the food opens the door, but the community events like Christmas banquet, fall festivals, summer barbecues, Even last week's Korean Congregation Bazaar, some of them I heard that actually showed up. Some of the neighborhood family actually showed up to the bazaar. So it's the community events that invite people into our church. And so this is also who EC is. So this ministry runs bi-weekly, and we always have room for more servant leaders. So if you have any Saturday mornings to give and available, this is definitely one of the more tangible ways to love our neighbors. Next slide, please. So ESL, I cannot overstate the importance of ESL. It's been around since 2016 at our church, so we've been serving English for second language. We've been teaching these classes for 10 years now. And just want to give you some stats. So the slide says 754 students, and I stand corrected. There was actually one year, 2016, so we didn't quite make it to the slide. We actually have close to 900 students had came through the doors. And last year, the students who came through these doors to attend these ESL classes represented 28 nations that span across Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. They came in looking to learn English. So in addition to receiving those lessons, they also find patient teacher, loving teacher, and a genuine welcome from our church community. Some have even asked questions about our faith precisely because they experience our care and our love in these classrooms long even before they have ever heard a sermon. So this is also who EC is. And if you have the availability, you don't have to be a professional teacher. We have lessons planned. We have all of the structures ready. You have availability. You have a willing heart. I will invite you to come and be a part of the ESL ministry as well. So, see, our love for the people doesn't just stop at this Germantown zip code. Because of the Great Commission doesn't have a geographic limit. Like I said earlier, we stand behind many long-term missionary families in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Central Asia. These are people who have given decades of their life, from 15 years to 25 years to 30 years to these nations. And we don't just support them from a distance just by sending them financial support. We actually go to them and go with them as well. So I want to share with you this past February, 2 months ago, Pastor Brian traveled to Osaka and Tokyo, Japan, to lay some groundwork for a potential future short-term mission partnership with a local ministry called J-House. And if you ever feel a small pull tuck in your heart about short-term mission, I would ask you to pay attention to your heart because these trips are open to you and these opportunities are available to you. A team is departing for the Philippines this July in a few months. There's an opportunity to go to Central Asia in October, and Japan is also in the horizon in 2027. And this is also who EC is. This brings me to the Revenue Memorial Scholarship Fund. I'm just so glad to share with you this morning that we not only met our initial fundraising goal of $100,000, we actually exceeded it. The total amount raised is $125,000. Out of that, $75,000 came from the generosity of both our congregation members here within our church and also folks that are outside of these four walls of our church as well. And our English congregation had also did a matching gift of $50,000. So the $75,000 plus the $50,000 becomes the $125,000 that has been achieved and raised so far. And we will continue to strategically and periodically raise additional funds in the future. And we already have an investment account set up. for some of you who may not know, that this is not a fund that will spend down and will just diminish to nothing and just goes away. It is a perpetual fund. It is a fund that will last for generations to come. What that means is that we will only distribute the earnings from the principals. So therefore, the greater the principal amount is, the greater the earning, if the market cooperates, right? And so once again, we don't do this as a charity event to just give money and send these students, seminary students or long-term missionaries on their way and bless them and say we'll pray for them. We will be very selective and strategically select these individuals. We will rather go quality and deeper with these students and with these long-term missionaries than go wide. So our support amounts will be higher. Instead of just giving $500 or $1,000 to many of the scholarship applicants, we would like to do something more substantial and with fewer. And the reason for that is that we would love to, and we would want to continue our walk with these seminary students and also with these long-term missionaries, even after they have become pastors and long-term missionaries in foreign nations. So just imagine, I put this thought in your mind, just imagine there may be long-term missionaries, there may be pastors, haven't even realized that they've been called, and they may be sitting in this room, they may be elsewhere outside this church. And what we're doing is that we have this vision and we're playing this long game in the kingdom and to get ourselves prepared and ready. And when God calls these individuals, we will have the means and we will have the resources to support them and to send them. And again, we don't send them just with money, we send them with love, with our relationship. And this is also who EC is. So this, if you would like to participate, this is one of the more meaningful way to invest in the next generation as kingdom builders. So I just ask you to think about what I just shared as you go home and look at these slides one more time. The banquets, the food distribution, the ESL classes, the short-term mission trips, the missionaries that we'll walk with, that will support the scholarship funds, and the countless many other things that we do with the community, Fall Festival, Summer Barbecue, Angel Tree with Roberto Clemente school across the street. We show up next door, we go to the nations, we play the long games in God's kingdom, and I just wanted to leave this with you. It's not just what we do, this is who EC is. And we will keep on keeping on, and will you join us? And I ask that something for you to pray and think through. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Brother Alex. So today, we're going to dive into the book of Daniel. I realize I don't have much time, so I'll just talk about a few things here. Many of you know the story of Daniel, right? As we dive into chapter 1 today, the book of Daniel actually starts and begins with Daniel already in Babylon, living in exile. As I mentioned 2 weeks ago, Daniel and his friends most likely came over to Babylon during the first deportation. And many historians and scholars estimate that Daniel was a teenager when he arrived in Babylon, and he lived there over 70 years. And I say that and I highlight that part because it's so significant that he was able to go there as a young person, a teenager, and for over 70 years that he has been a very faithful person throughout many changes. And just keep that in mind, how he left behind a legacy of godly influence over a pagan nation over such a long time. And one thing I do want to point out as we recognize how young he was is that we've seen over the last few months or weeks how God accomplishes great things through teenagers and young adults like Joseph, David, Samuel, Jeremiah, Josiah, even Mary that we talked about last week. These were mostly teenagers and young adults. Think about that. I was just reminded that we should not underestimate what God can do through our teenagers, and that we should stop treating them like little kids. We should empower them and create more opportunities to live out their full potential. There's more to this life than academics, sports, college, and friends. It is my prayer that the Lord will raise up a young generation of faithful followers of Jesus Christ. And that starts with us. What we determine to do today, what we pursue as parents, what dreams that we share as parents, what priorities that we set as a family. This book is an encouragement in so many ways because it helps us to believe that we can live in the world without being immersed by it or be influenced by this world. Daniel and his friends lived in the center of the pagan nation as prisoners of war, yet they were able to exert spiritual and even some political influence without compromising their faith. Think about that for a second. Living in a pagan nation as prisoners of war, and yet they were able to have so much influence without compromising their faith. And what's especially impressive is that Daniel remained faithful and continued to exert influence over multiple kings, even through a regime change. At the end of his life, it wasn't Babylon anymore. It was the Medo-Persians who came and took over. And yet, even in that nation, Daniel still was able to have influence over that nation. People, power dynamics, government, and culture, they all changed. But regardless of whatever circumstance Daniel found himself in, his faith remained the same throughout his life. What a life. What a testimony. With that thought, let's jump into the passage for today. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. I'll read it for us. During the third year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, Azariah was called Abednego. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. So let me first talk about the young men. And as I told you earlier, the context of this book takes us to the final years of Judah, when Babylonians came and attacked and conquered Judah and even destroyed the temple of God. This was a dark time for God's people. The young men, Daniel and his buddies, and maybe perhaps many others, they were deported and they were living in a foreign nation as prisoners of war. And as prisoners of war, these young men were not particularly excited or content with their life. Would you be? If you were in their shoe? Probably not. What did they do to deserve such punishment? After all, it was their parents' sin. It was their generation who served the idols and ignored the warnings from God, one after another. Can you imagine how bitter they must have been? They might have even wondered whether God is even real. My parents talked about God, they taught about God, but if God is real, why would God's people live in bondage under a pagan nation? A similar question that we ask all the time. If God is good, why do we have to suffer? Why do good people suffer? I'm sure they ask same questions, especially because they were living in bondage. Everything around them told them, do not trust God. God is not powerful. What made it worse was that they were the brightest in the royal family and among the best young people. They were the elite of the elites of their people, considering that they were among the group of young men selected as potential people who could serve at the king's court. We saw in verse 4 that the king told them, make sure you select people who are the best, most good looking, no physical defect, showing aptitude of every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand. Just for fun, I actually entered in ChatGPT. Can you give me an image of this verse 4? You should go home and try. They actually look pretty good. They gave a picture of this Middle Eastern people, and then I asked, can you give me a version of Korean people? They actually look pretty good. They look better than BTS. No offense to BTS fans here. Anyway, that was just fun. I was thinking about sharing it, but I forgot. These people were just perfect people. Can you imagine? If they hand-selected all good-looking people, no physical defect, I don't even know what that means. As I scan this room, I don't know if anyone in this room could qualify. Your mom probably taught you that you are this person, but I don't know if any of us will make the cut. All jokes aside, these young men probably had big dreams and aspirations as young people with so much talent, so much knowledge. They probably dreamed about having a good future. However, their background, their knowledge, their abilities no longer mattered because they were prisoners of war. They were living in exile. There was no hope, no future for them. So they thought. In this passage, I want to invite you and see the hand of God working in and through their lives. Even the way that they were selected, you have to know that it was God's hand that was involved in this all process. See, unlike the Assyrians who captured the northern kingdom, they actually used fear and ruthless tactics in their dealing with the prisoners. That's why Jonah didn't want to do anything with them, remember? But Babylonians were smarter. They actually selected the best young men and they placed them in a training track, intention to assimilate them into their system, to use their talent to better their country. I think they were very smart about this. And we read here, they were given new names. These young men, they were given new names. By giving them Babylonian names, they were being conformed to their system and religion. As we know, all their names were associated with God. By changing their name, not only they were trained in their culture and language, they were trying to change everything about them. This was an effort at total indoctrination. The food, the name, education, culture, language, you name it. Intending to make these young men leave behind their Hebrew God. Yahweh and their culture to become Babylonians from inside out. And I took some time to think about this tactic of Babylonians. And I thought about two things that were really good about. And I think this could serve as a warning for all of us so that we're aware of what the enemy can use against us. One is separation, or you can call it isolation. Remember, these people were taken from their parents. These young men were brought to Babylonia away from their home, from their parents, their spiritual mentors, from the place of worship, from their community. They were literally isolated in this foreign nation at an age where they could have been easily influenced. These people were impressionable. They were left alone without much guidance from a godly community. Does this ring a bell? Does it sound familiar? I think there's a reason why so many young people leave church when they enter college. I'm not saying that college is gonna just mess all the people up. I think there's some truth to this. Separation from godly community, isolation from godly community will have an impact. Please think about that, parents. Please continue to disciple, pray for your children, so that even if they go away somewhere, they will find a godly community where they can be plugged in. Enemy knows how to get to us. Enemy does. And if you are being separated, if you feel like you don't need anyone to help you, you're wrong. This world, the enemy, will isolate you so that you are more vulnerable for attack. Continue to plug yourself in to a community. Continue to have people around you who can challenge you, who can sharpen you, who can encourage you, who can pray for you and with you. Second tactic is the pressure to conform. This was Babylon's assimilation strategy. And I think this world has a similar system to have people conform to its way to become, quote unquote, successful in this world. In many ways, you cannot become worldly successful unless you conform to this world system. You know that, I know that. In order to go to good school, you have to assimilate into this world. In order to stand out in this world, you have to assimilate. If not, it feels like you are the odd one out. You lose out on the opportunity to make it in this world. And that's what we see here. That's my second point. An opportunity comes with a great cost. Brothers and sisters, every opportunity comes with a cost. You see here, these young men are given an opportunity. First opportunity is this, opportunities for success and prosperity. And how do they do that? By assimilating into the culture. Being selected to partake in the training process was an amazing opportunity. Wouldn't you like it? This is kind of like the internship that you dream about. Not a free labor, paid internship. I keep telling my daughter, Reina, like, why are you trying to get all this internship and work for free? All you're going to do is make copies. What does that have to do with your future? You can come to church and I'll make you copies. You can make copies. You can clean the floor. Why do you have to go to hospital to do the same thing? But this internship was different. As long as they stick through the program, they would have been set for life, for success, fame, comfort, riches, and honor. They probably thought, finally, this is our chance. Remember what we said in the beginning? They were prisoners of war. But this was their way out. This was the golden ticket to get them out of their miserable circumstance. to gain power, gain status, gain influence. But there was cost, as I told you. Cost of assimilating into that culture was compromising their faith. And I don't have to emphasize this. You and I know what that looks like. But I believe there was another opportunity that was given to them. Opportunity to show their faith. Opportunity to show God who they are, what they're made of. To prove to God their allegiance to Him and Him only. To prove their faithfulness to God by being set apart and not giving in to idolatry and worshiping false gods. But there was also cost to that. What's the cost? You need to sacrifice your comfort. You probably have to sacrifice your future. Success. Whatever seemed good to them. Maybe even their life. They could get killed. Which happened to many people. Because they chose to keep their faith, people actually gave their life on the line. Refusing the king's food is a direct disobedience to a pagan king who had the power to kill them, to do whatever he wanted. Their lives could have been in real danger. So today, if you are given this opportunity, what would you choose? Would you choose to just follow and buy into the system of this world? Whatever that seems enticing, what gives you more money, whatever track that guarantees better future for you and for your children, whatever that looks like, at the end of the day, it really comes down to, do you trust God? Do you trust that God holds your future and your children's future? Every decision you make, as you will see here, Daniel resolved not to defile himself. It was a decision that he made before he got to that situation. And at every situation, he had to make the decision over and over and again. Think about it in the context of the ancient world. Far more than this world that we're living in, there was a stark difference between the food and the comfort that was enjoyed by the elites and the royals and the common people. Would that be enticing for you and I? I bet it would have been. This was a real temptation for Daniel and his friends. Again, they are left alone. These are young people who no longer have spiritual mentors who will guide them to make these decisions. But I'm so impressed that they were able to stick to their faith. I think their parents did a pretty good job. For the 14 years or 15 years they had back in Judah, as they grew up, I bet their parents just drilled it in. No matter what. No matter what. Choose God. Choose God. And when the moment came to test their faith, they were able to choose God. And think about this. These were just 4 people out of many who came down. Telling us there were other people who compromised. Same people who grew up in the same community, but there were select few who chose to obey God. Even though all their friends, all the other people chose to just go with the system. So let me ask you today, what battles do you need to fight so that you don't defile your faith, yourself? What decisions do you need to make today so you don't compromise your faith? Is there any food or drink you should think twice before consuming? Activities you should think twice about? A movie you should probably not watch? What about places and people that you should stay away from? I'm not saying that you should isolate yourself from this world. That's not what I'm saying. I actually fully believe there should be no divide between sacred and secular. There's no such thing. And this book is a proof of that. We should be able to keep our faith in this world. There's not a such thing that tells us to build a home and don't let any outsiders in. That's not a missional life. So that's not what I'm saying. But there are places and people that you should avoid because you're tempted to compromise your faith. Maybe for a season until you become more stronger. Where are you compromising your faith? And remember, just because another Christian or everyone else is doing something doesn't mean that it's okay. Just because everyone is cheating on their tests, I tell kids all the time, just because that person is doing it next to you does not mean it's okay. Just because everyone's lying and getting away with it, that doesn't mean it's okay. Just because at work everyone's coming in late and being lazy and still get paid and getting promotion, does not mean you can do the same. God holds us to a higher standard. Even if you think no one's watching you, our God is watching you. Not to punish you, but God calls us to live with a higher standard. We need to learn to obey God and choose God rather than seeking our own benefit, enjoyment, or even trying to get people's approval. And I'll leave it up to you in terms of how this looks like practically in your life. Just because everyone skips church on Sundays does not mean it's okay. I'm not here to promote tradition and legalistic way of serving God, but you know in your conscience. But the tricky part is, once you give in, it gets easier next time, doesn't it? What would your children say that is your priority of your life? Would your children define your life as parents, as people who are devoted to the Lord? Be careful what you say in front of your children, what you eat, what you drink, what activities you engage in. They learn. Please know this is not a judgment on you. I'm speaking to myself as well. But if we truly want to be the light of this world, we have to make a decision today. This applies to even non-parents here in this room, young adults, college students. What kind of faith are you going to live out? Don't you hate those who are hypocritical? But why repeat the same thing? Why do the same thing that you hate so much from your parents' generation? Why live double life? It's time to stop. Time to be serious about your faith. Are you willing to pay the cost? Are you? Are we willing to pay the cost to be different? To continue to stand up for what's right? That's why I highlighted earlier, for 70 years, Daniel was able to do this. 70 years, all throughout his life. Imagine all the temptations that came to him every single moment. He lived in the pagan nation all his life. God did not take him out back home so that he can have more comfortable life and be a better Christian. No, he was in the pagan nation all his life. And yet, he was able to shine so bright. No matter what came, no matter what king was above him. And you know what? Because he was so set on his ways, so set on honoring God, people respected him. As you read through the book of Daniel, even the king, Nebuchadnezzar, he encounters the Lord. Why? Because of Daniel's faith. He hated his gut. He hated how he would disobey his order. But no matter what he did, as he throws him into the fire furnace, as he throws him to the lion's den, it didn't matter. Daniel resolved to not defile himself. What are you willing to do today to not compromise your faith? Again, everyone has your own application that you need to struggle with. Ask the Lord. Let us be set apart. We cannot be just like the world and pretend like we're set apart. What sets you apart from the next co-worker who's working with you? Do they see any difference? The way you live, the decisions you make, the way you use your money? The way you spend your time? I have the worship team come up. You know, as you see the story of Daniel, I told you earlier, you see what God is doing here. It wasn't just up to Daniel and his resolve. God was at work. We see in verse 9 that God had already caused the official to show favor and compassion to him. So when he rejected the food from the king's table, it wasn't just Daniel's resolve that got this done. It was God's favor working for him. And the king thought that he was preparing these 4 young men to serve him and serve Babylon. But guess what? It was God who was preparing them in the Babylonian system to use them as key figures to become the government leaders of the nation. I was reading through this, many articles and commentaries, and one person actually mentioned the connection of Daniel living in Babylon and how much impact he had for generations by mentioning the wise men in Jesus' days. Guess where they came from? Babylon. They were descendants of Babylonian. Guess how they knew to look for the Messiah? They were making the point, perhaps Daniel with his influence, as you will see, half of Daniel turns into a prophetic book. He talks about the future Jewish king who will come one day. And they made a connection. The influence of Daniel went beyond the 70 years of his life. Perhaps there are books that he wrote. Perhaps there are things that he wrote down where for generations and generations, they passed it down so that one day the wise men read something and went to go look for the Messiah. What kind of impact are you passing on today? Don't just think about your life and the life that you get to live or your children. I want your faith and your story and your testimony to be told to generations. The king's intention was to prepare these young men to fulfill his purpose. But we see here, God had a bigger plan. God equipped the young men with exactly what they needed to fulfill God's purpose in the king's court. So today, you are in the king's court. Many of you are in the government, in your workplaces, in the schools, academics, at homes. God has a purpose for you. God has a purpose for our children. Their goal is not to become the pro athlete or the successful businessman. These things are just tools and instruments that God will use to make God known. To make God known. And in order for us to follow God's plan that He has for us, we need to make a decision today whether we're going to worship God or assimilate into the system of this world. And that decision is yours. God cannot force that on you. But I urge you today to make a decision. I'm not asking all of you to become pastors and missionaries, but I am asking you to become Christians, followers of Jesus Christ, so that when everyone sees you, they see a disciple of Jesus Christ by the way you live, by the way you handle your work, your business, where you treat others. Do people respect you for your faith? I tell people this is the best time for us to shine with our faith. Why? Because people are so inclusive. There's a general consensus of respecting one another's religion. This is the time for us to talk about your faith. What did you do this weekend? I went to church. I'm a Sunday school teacher. I'm a worship leader. God has set the stage for us to be able to talk about things freely without being judged. The question is, will you talk about it? Will you be a worshiper on Monday, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday? Or will you be just a Sunday Christian? The decision is up to you. Let's all rise. Let's sing the song, Christ be magnified. And when we get to the bridge part of this song, let's really make a decision today that I will not bow down to idols, but will continue to worship Him and Him only. So let's sing this song together.